Hello? 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 If you can hear this, it's not too late. I've returned to warn you. This is Time Pop, a podcast that discusses time travel and pop culture. There are spoilers. I've seen the future, and nothing is sacred to these folks. Your past, present, and future are sure to be ruined. Even if you could go back in time, as I have, you will never forget what you are about to hear. You've been warned. This is Time Pop.
Time Pop. Meow.
Welcome, travelers, one and all, as we guide you through the experience of time travel using pop culture as our backpack. I am Dez.
And I am Ari.
And this is
Time Pop.
Welcome, everybody. So we just watched Project Almanac, Ari.
Yep.
Tell us about this movie.
So Project Almanac came out in 2015. It is PG-13, and it is a interesting movie in the sense of how it was shot. It is filmed in a handheld / found footage type of style, which you just educated me on that.
Which I had seen this movie before, and I had forgotten that aspect of it. So
yeah.
This genre kind of came and went from our zeitgeist.
Yeah,
quickly.
So if you don't know what that style means, it's people within the story are always holding the camera. So it's shaky and it's all over the place. And you do tend to question, if they're filming that from a distance, how did they get the sound from way over there?
Thank you. Yes. What high school kids walk around with lav mics on.
But we are not here to talk about how it was made. We're here to talk about the time travel. So the synopsis of this movie is high school kids find a time machine, specifically one very smart character by the name of David, who just got accepted to MIT, discovers an old video camera in his attic with the footage of his, I believe, 7th birthday party. And in the mirror in the background of this party is himself as an adult.
With a stained shirt.
With a stained shirt and a very specific keychain. And from there sparks the questions and the searching between him and his friends and his sister. So the story goes that David and his two other very smart, nerdy type of friends,
Adam and Quinn.
Who's
starring in this movie?
Oh, that's a very good question.
Do we have any? I don't know that there are anybody that we've seen a lot of
I have
since then, but
never seen these actors before, but I am also not good with names and faces.
Yeah, me neither. That's why I need IMDb to remind me that these are real people.
So David, the main character, is played by Jonny Weston.
Way to go, Johnny.
We also have Sofia Black-D'Elia. That's quite a name. We have Sam Lerner. We have Alan Evans. Don't make me read the names.
That's okay.
It's a terrible idea.
We will be referring to these people as their characters. We have David, Adam, Quinn, David's sister, Chris, and the hot girl, Jess.
Jessie or Jess. Yep.
Yes. And sorry to reduce her to that, but for the first 20 minutes of this film, that is who she is. She's the hot girl from a distance that David is luring at.
The love interest.
The love interest. Thank you. There's a more appropriate way
So
to say that.
After discovering the old video camera with the video of him appearing in the birthday party 10 years earlier, they start to
very quickly
figure out why this happened.
Yes.
And they do this in, a very detective style-esque. They recreate that exact shot. So they get the mirror and the placement in the room, and you were standing here and you were reaching here. What's there? Oh, it's a light switch.
Ta-da!
It's a light switch to the basement. Let's go into the basement. And apparently there's this gated off area in the basement that they are not allowed to go into.
Apparently for 10 years, Dad's shop has just been gated off, and they gain access to it very easily.
Yeah.
And no one cares that they're in there. It seems like, Mom would have said, don't touch your dad's stuff, and would have noticed when they started fooling around in there. But the sanctuary was broken and played with very easily.
Right. And it looks like a typical science lab. Fluorescent lights and counters and odd metal things laying around. And of course, this was his father's lab, who they alluded to is not there and passed away. Not many details about that. But they then discover a funny noise whenever they turn the light switch on. It sounded almost like magnets engaging and disengaging, electronic magnets, which is what it was.
Yeah.
So they keep switching the light off and on, listening to the sound, and discover it's coming from the floor, which they then realize there's a hidden secret compartment. Once the lights were off, it disconnected the magnets. This is not important. I just thought it was...
Yeah, no, it was. I mean, they play it up. They do kind of a good job of giving you technical data without boring you with it, which I love to be bored by the technical data of it.
Me too.
But a lot of movies that would have just glossed over all of this, they threw in rather quickly to give it the science some ground, but not drag the movie to a halt with jargon.
Yeah, and they did a pretty good job as far as the pace goes through most of this movie. There is one spot where you and I agree on where it was like, okay, let's move on. But we'll get to that. So in the floor, in the secret compartment in the floor, they find a metal lockbox about the size of like boot box.
Yes.
And they take it out and they open it. It's a funny looking device with glass box and all these manuals, paper manuals, and they take it out. Oh,
that's right. The blueprints were down there too, weren't it? Yeah, wasn't
They take it out and, they're smart kids and they start to read it and decipher it and decide they want to put it together. And, it's called Project Almanac. They read it and say some scientific words and discover that's...
From DARPA.
Yes.
Apparently Dad was working with DARPA.
Right. Was he? I missed that.
I heard
Okay.
DARPA a couple times, and I think they said that it was on the blueprints. And they gloss over kind of quickly, but they mention temporal display, electromagnetic energy
relocation, temporal relocation.
There we go. Yeah,
And
they mention Einstein's theory of relativity are some of the equations that they run across.
And there was the classic moment of temporal relocation. What does that mean? That means time travel. And then another kid says, we can't build this. And then another kid says, I think we already did because of what we saw in the video.
Ta-da.
So thus starting the process.
And then at least 3 weeks pass, like what looked like an evening in the basement, they again add a quick piece of dialogue of, we've been working on this for 3 weeks or 4 weeks or something. So again, to not bore us with all of their tests, but let us know that this didn't just happen, they kind of throw that in during this montage
of them trying to put together or build this time device.
Yes.
Time travel device.
Do they build this time travel device, Ari?
Oh, yes, they do.
Yes, they do.
And they do an interesting job of making that process fun. They got to get the power for it, and the first source of power doesn't work, and then they start to turn it on, and things in the room start to vibrate, and then another time they turn it on, and things start to levitate and rotate.
A few pieces get fused together when they come back. We're still not sure if things are traveling through time or being displaced.
Right. So that's a fun science aspect of it. They do show, the process of that, which is fun for us, all our science nerds.
So the first time travel test that is successful, they have a GoPro on a toy car, on a Barbie car, and they make this Barbie car disappear.
And they have
that's right. They put a stopwatch in the Barbie car, very, very Doc Brown style. They mention a lot of time travel movies in this, but they don't mention Back to the Future.
They don't mention Back to the Future.
They use some Back to the Future tricks, but they don't mention that by name, though they do mention Looper, Groundhog's Day, The Terminator.
Time Cop.
Time Cop, yes. So after this car disappears, where do they find it, Ari?
So what happens is they discover that the space in which travels is a cone shape. So wherever the device is...
So let's get into this real quick.
Yeah.
So let's jump ahead a little bit. What is the time machine? Is it are they carrying around Dad's device in his backpack?
So that is a question that I wrote down in my notes.
Okay.
Does the time machine have to be on them or in a general vicinity? Because the very first tests, they had all those wires and devices on the counter.
Yes.
And then the toy car that they first tested it with was on the ground, say 3 feet away from it. So they made it seem like once the device is activated, there was this cylinder cone that went straight up from a spot, and then whatever was inside that cone or cylinder would travel.
And then, so that's the initial test, but then they immediately just kind of, as far as I can tell, they just went away from that. And now we just know that time travel exists. Let's not worry about that.
The mechanics of it. Yeah, they didn't do such a great job as far as continuity goes with the actual device and how it's powered, because at one point they needed a car battery to power it, and that's how they did their first test. And then later on they discovered they just needed, was it hydrogen cell?
Well, and it looked like like, I mean,
canisters.
they had some device that needed cooling. That was the big jump they had to get over, was they needed enough power, which is why they needed a fancier battery, which they eventually stole from a Prius. But then they needed to cool it because they kept overpowering these batteries. So they needed a stronger battery, and then they needed stronger cooling devices. And somehow they managed to get this again into a backpack from what was a large table.
Yeah.
They then got it down to they used some words. They used some fancy words for what types of batteries they have and what types of cooling they were using, and I think we were just supposed to accept that was how they were able to shrink it down. And then because then they have the actual Go device was a cell phone.
Yeah, how you program when you go to was on a cell phone app.
And connected to, and again, at one point, it was very obviously connected to something. And then, I don't know if I always saw a wire coming from the cell phone later on in the movie. Or again, if they just made it app-powered and it was Wi-Fi.
I think there was a wire.
To the backpack. Before we go too far, I need to know how they got back. So when they hit go, did they know when they were going to come back? Because they didn't have to...
Well, hang on. Let's not jump ahead. So let's finish describing that's one thing that Des and I do very well is jump all over the timeline. Yes. So to finish describing their first test with the toy car, they had 2 stopwatches. One was red, one was black. They started them at the same time, put one in the car with a GoPro, activated the device, and I think they tried to set it to 1 minute in the past. They turned the machine on, things start flying around, start rotating. There's sparks and lights, and the lights go out, and all of a sudden it goes black and the lights come back on and the car is gone. And then they look around and they see that the car is now infused into the basement cement wall. Fortunately, though, the camera and the stopwatch were perfectly fine, but half of the car is infused into the wall. And they did another shot of like a screwdriver and a wrench that were also fused together, which is very serious.
I think that was even a previous test.
Yeah, which is a very serious thing. Like, this is a concern that you could become fused with some other solid material in this jump.
Another person.
They never addressed that. That's okay. It's all going to work out. So in this test, they get the camera back and they realized that the car had jumped an hour in the past.
I thought it was 2.
Oh, sorry. 2 was
2 hours in the past. Yes.
Yeah. And so then the footage from the GoPro that was on the car is now showing them getting ready for that exact test.
And I'll have to watch it again.
Okay.
And see if we see that car on the wall at all.
That's right.
During the movie.
That's a good point to go back and watch. Which brings me back.
Never mind. I'll get to that point in a minute.
Jumping around the timeline.
Yes.
So that brings up the first question of, okay, so that means there were 2 cars. The one that did the time.
Maybe. That's what we don't know.
Right.
If there were ever 2 cars in one place, or if that one car went and
So I think later on it does answer that question, because once they do start jumping with themselves,
that's right.
They come across themselves in the past. So I think that does eventually answers the question is yes, there were 2 cars. So 2 of the same thing existing in one timeline.
So then the hot girl, of course, pushes this forward because the guys are they're still a little trepidatious, but the cute girl who just entered their group, so they've been watching afar, it's her battery that they use to get this thing going.
Her car battery.
So she gets involved very quickly, say, what the hell are you doing with my car battery? They say, we're building a time machine. And then they run this test. And while they're talking about maybe sending some frogs or mice back, she's like, come on, guys, let's do this. We built a time machine. We're going back.
And she also brings back the line of, you've clearly already done it.
Yes.
Because there you are in that old video. So, I mean, how can you argue with that?
Let's do it.
So they do it. They go out to the woods and they travel. And I have to say, the effects that they use for the travel are kind of fun. Very dramatic.
Yeah. That's where the found footage worked really cool, I think, with the cameras floating around and images
wind
shuddering.
And bottles, levitating and spinning around and sparks coming from nowhere. And
okay, so the first time they go back, they do the dumbest thing ever. The first thing they do is go to so they go back 24 hours. And the first thing they decide to do is go find one of themselves 24 hours before. So they run to was it Adams or Quinn's? I forget which one is which. Which one's the douche?
They go to Quinn.
I think they go to Quinn's house.
Yeah.
And Quinn, go ahead.
So they are running down the streets. It's the middle of the night. They're running down the street and they see that it is Quinn's house. And they're like, hey, look, let's go look. And they go in the house. They just, are able to walk in the house. No one sees them.
My mom's sleeping.
Yeah, it's like 5 kids. Nobody notices them. The magic of movies.
Yes.
And they find himself sleeping. And this is where I was very proud. They go, Quinn or whoever it was goes, oh, I've always wanted to do this. I love the movie Looper.
Yes.
Great little reference to Looper. And he goes and he takes a marker and he draws on the back of the sleeping Quinn's neck. And as he's drawing on the neck, you see what he's drawing appear on his own neck.
Yes.
So an ode to Looper, really well done. And then a fun thing happens.
Quinn sees himself and they both start to kind of flash in and out of reality. And then they just kind of end up outside.
They get scared and freaked out and the group backs away and it's all fine.
And everything's fine. But we know now that time is nothing to mess with.
Right.
They got cute very fast. So now again, so this is the big question I have to come back to. So they go 24 hours in the past. How do they get back to their original? Because they just, so if you're watching them travel through time, they disappear from this spot and then they reappear seconds later. We don't know how exactly. At one point they go for 9 hours and they're gone for 41 seconds, I think they say. But do they hit the return home button?
So this is the first major question of this time travel movie. You could call it a loophole or whatever you want to call it. They set the timer. We're going to go back 24 hours. They mess around a little bit. Then as they're running away in fear because there's like a dog chasing them, they hit a button saying like, send us back, send us back.
Did he hit a button?
They never never talked about this, but as they're running, send us back, running away from this dog, they hit a button and they appear where they first left from. So here is a big flaw with this story is the location. They can time travel, but what's happening with their location? The initial jump with humans was in the same spot. They travel 24 hours in the past and arrive in the same spot. Then they walk away from that spot, get into some trouble, are running away from a dog, hit the send us back button. And when they appear back, they're in the initial spot in the forest and the dog is there.
The dog was in their vortex when they returned.
Good word. It was a vortex.
Yes.
That's what I couldn't think of. So that's the first kind of like, okay, this is a little gray area, questionable little holes in the story.
Because later on, because I don't think they ever hit the return button. Well, I guess we don't really see it. We just always see their antics. And then speaking of antics, so we see the first big change because the dog got stuck in their vortex on the way back. When they're driving home that night, they see a bunch of lost dog flyers.
So they have changed the timeline.
They have changed it. The dog is fine, assuming they probably just let the dog go. The dog runs home. Everything's fine.
They call it reality. They say, we've changed reality.
Oh, that's right. That's what they're calling alpha timeline is reality. So now that we know how time travel exists, they do what kids do.
Yeah, well, first, like responsible teenagers, they make rules. They say there's no traveling alone. We got to go as a group. There's no is it like selfish things?
No jumping alone. Film everything. Keep it a secret.
Right. Those were their rules.
I think that was
outside of that, they could do whatever they want, and they proceed to, which is a fun moment in the movie. They do what high school kids would do if they could time travel. Including
one of them just failed a test. One of them's getting bullied. One of them needs money for MIT, and one of them is a douche. Because what is the cute girl doesn't change anything, does she? Her life is just perfect. She's cute. Everyone loves her. She just wants to hang out with the nerds. So yeah, they have a lot of fun doing that. I really liked when the kid who failed the test. So he goes back to pass the test, even though he passed the initial test. Now the teacher has an extra question for him, and he says, "You didn't ask me that last time." And he says, "What do you mean last time?" So then they Groundhog Day it, as he says.
Yeah, and there's a reference to Groundhog Day.
We see at least 5 tries, but there may be more than that. We don't know how many times it took him to nail this test.
Which is a fun aspect of time travel, is doing the same timeline over and over again and seeing all the little subtle changes. I like.
Again, we're seeing also too that when you go back, it's not always going to happen the way things are.
Yeah.
Which comes back again later, and they set that up really subtly and really nice with this little montage, this test montage.
They also do things like play the lottery to win a lot of money, but they write down one of the numbers wrong and they don't win as much money as they thought they would.
Oh, that's right. They do write it down. I kept thinking that it changed because I remembered that from the last time I saw it, and I thought that the lotto numbers changed.
They talk about like it was supposed to be 49 and it looked like a 44 or something like that, but that's not a big part of the story. It was a funny moment where they were getting this check of like over $1 million with sad looks on their faces instead of happy because they won $1 million. So there's one moment where David, the main character, referencing he wants to save his dad. Then they don't really do anything with that. I wrote a couple of questions down.
Hello? 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 If you can hear this, it's not too late. Go back in time. Go back in time. Go back in time. Go back in time.
Yeah, we're definitely on. Just trying to remember where to pick up. But go ahead and start talking.
Yeah, I don't know where we left off, but we'll start with they have mastered the time traveling and they are doing all the things they've always wanted to do, like get back at the bully and pass this test and win the lottery so they have money to do things.
All of these things going on within a day or a week tops, maybe, is what they're traveling at this point. And then David decides to give it more power, and he surprises the crew with a... Go ahead.
He surprises the crew with a jump, as they call it. Every time they travel, they call it a jump, which is common in time travel. They jump to 3 months in the past to a concert called Lollapalooza, which takes place in Chicago. Now, we're not sure where they live exactly. They don't really mention it.
It comes on, I swear the cops say Atlanta at the end, Atlanta Police Department.
Yeah.
You thought you might have heard Orlando.
Yeah. I guess we could have rewound it and actually found out, but we didn't. That's okay. So there does bring up the question of location.
Yes.
So they can jump in time, but they don't mention anything about location, and all of a sudden they're in the heart of Lollapalooza with backstage passes and fun to be had everywhere. And I did write down a question.
Yeah, so real quick. So they go back 3 months for 9 hours. It costs them 41 seconds in real time. So yeah, they're at Lollapalooza for 9 hours. What question do you have?
I wrote a question down. They get there and they're trying to figure out which stage to go to and which act to see. And one guy pulls out his phone and he's like, I've got all the videos on Instagram. I can see which ones were the best.
His phone is still in real time.
That's a huge question mark for me because his phone would be running on current internet.
It would be, the towers of that moment.
Unless he saved those specific things on the actual device.
Which he wouldn't have. This isn't David who planned the trip.
He wouldn't have planned it.
This was one of them that just showed up.
So that's my big question mark.
That's a big issue. There's another issue later too where there's a real-time cell phone issue, and I can't remember what it is. I might get to it in a minute. So this is the 1 hour mark of the movie. They're having fun. Nothing bad can happen, and they're at Lollapalooza. But what doesn't happen at Lollapalooza, Ari?
So there's a moment between the main character David and the love interest where they could have had their first kiss, and he chickens out essentially and doesn't happen. And when they get back from this adventure, she seems not interested in him anymore.
Well, because it was kind of a slight almost. Like he didn't mean it as a slight. He's just a nervous kid, but she took it as, I guess he's not into me, and so I'm just gonna move on.
So the first time they get back from the concert, a couple of things changed. They're minor things, like the mom has a job now when she didn't before.
I guess that's the only one that changed that during that first jump.
So David is so pissed that he didn't make the move on her at the concert that he decides to jump back again by himself and not tell anybody about it.
Breaking big rule number 1, jumping alone. So now comes actually big question number 2.
Where was the original David?
Yes. I kept waiting for him to trip himself, or like I thought he was gonna.
So the reason why Des and I are asking this, because in an earlier scene where they went back to retake the test, they had one of the people distract the original character so that the new character, we're starting to get confusing now, is the one...
The time-traveling character
right.
could take the test.
Take his place. So they told the kid, like, hey, class was canceled today, go home. And so the kid goes home, but then the time traveler goes in to take and pass the test. They did not address this issue when David went back into Lollapalooza. He just shows up and then kisses her.
There was only one of them at that point. And so, yeah, that's another big hole. And I guess maybe there's only one time traveling you, like once you... Because, yeah, now did new time traveling alone David, did he spend the whole day back in Lollapalooza? Or did he... Yeah, I guess that's a way we could...
Yeah, you could really get into this and talk about, like, can you pick specific days and times when you appear and when you come back? And, you know, for example, I'm sure there's a name for this and we should look it up. When you travel back multiple times to the same spot, do you see the other versions of yourself in that time? Which is a fun episode in Family Guy, which we should review soon.
Definitely. I'm thinking of 11/22/63 when each time he travels back in time, he resets the past. But then again, and if that happened in this time, then the original group wouldn't have been there either. So yeah, we missed. There's a deleted scene, I think, where David gags himself, and ties him up,
or talks to himself, or
locks him in a bathroom.
Somehow, yeah,
something.
Takes his place to make the kiss. So just to finish kind of the overview of the movie, so he kisses her. He comes back and she is in his bed essentially, and they are a thing, and they've had sex
at that moment. Like again, when he comes back, that moment, he's like, I wonder what happened. She comes out of the bathroom naked.
She's in a towel.
She's in a towel.
You don't get to see boobs. So, and then life seems great. He's got a girlfriend. Everything's great. And then he gets to school and major things have changed.
That morning, Mom has an interview, not a job. She has to go to. The team, it's kind of subtle, but in the background where you realize that the basketball team is having a great season and is destined to win the championship. And now the team has lost that championship game, if they even make it to the championship game. Dr. Lou, one of the teachers, loses his job. That's kind of a subtle thing that happens. And a plane crash.
Yeah, so the other guys start noticing major differences. They say things like, you know, that's not how it was. We don't remember that. And they start to get worried, and they start to think that their big jump altogether is what changed things. And one of the characters, maybe it was David, starts doing the circle within the circle within the circle, and they call it the ripple effect.
Because they're like, sure, we did some subtle changes, but our subtle changes then went out.
Well, what you're thinking of is like one of the main players on the team broke his leg, so then they didn't win the championship, which means the parents weren't watching the game, which means he flew the plane that crashed or something like that.
Yeah, the pilot who would have been at that game was then working that night instead, flying a plane.
And it crashed.
That crashed.
Yeah, so they do explain the ripple effect, and they feel like they're responsible, and all of the friends, the whole group, wants to go back. And
because they still don't know that David's gone back alone.
Yeah.
So they assume this was a group effort to send this ripple out.
Right, so they want to correct it by not going to Lollapalooza.
So how was... That's right, because they fell in love now, she wasn't at the party. Or no, because... So this ripple starts during the initial time travel, I think, because it's the lights going out during their initial test that causes the people to run out of the party next door to David's house. Since there's no light, but the basketball player
don't know that right away. So
I think it's because David goes back alone, and because David goes back alone,
that's all later. You're absolutely right, and that's all later.
That's all later.
Yes, which David figures out on his own.
Because Jesse wasn't at that party because they were sleeping together.
Now you're confusing me. Okay. So in the context of the movie, in the span of the movie of how it works, the whole group wants to go back and change Lollapalooza, and David says no because he knows he will lose Jessie as a girlfriend. So he tries to figure out specific points in the timeline that he can go to correct the ripple effect, like helping the guy not break his leg. Apparently he broke his leg, which they were not clear about this.
They were not. not.
He broke his leg at the party of the night where they had their first test with the car that got stuck in the wall.
Jesse's car. Or Jesse's car battery.
Right, or the toy car that got stuck in the car.
Yes.
Apparently when they did that experiment, all the lights went out in the entire neighborhood, and this was a cool outside party, and some kid got hit by a car.
Well, I think they ran outside because the power went out. I think they were in the house party, and then because the power went out, everyone came out to see what the hell was going on. But who knows? It was a pretty big party. There was probably people.
Yeah, it was in the street. It was
Either way, the
cool
lights going
block.
out caused more chaos and people to run out in the streets wondering what the hell's going on.
So then the next bit of the movie is David trying to go back to these specific moments to fix
does
things.
he? I think he just picked that one moment. I think he was trying to find the linchpin of all the moments.
He brings
and
out
that's where he decides that this leg breaking is
the catalyst of everything.
The rock, the pebble that starts the ripple.
So there's a fun moment of him at a blackboard drawing lines and timelines and arrows and words, to solve the equation of how he can fix everything but still keep his girlfriend Jessie. So he does. He figures this one moment at the party to save the kid from breaking his leg. And he does it. He succeeds. But then his friend is in the hospital all of a sudden.
Because that's right. His friend then gets hurt during the celebration of the basketball championship. I think I heard one of them say, I don't know, it happened after the game.
Okay.
So I think in big championship game that then does take place, his friend now somehow gets hurt. And then
they rushed through it. The last dramatic moments of trying to fix everything but save everything, they rushed through.
This movie got a little confused. Well, I shouldn't say it got confused, but it definitely it tried to hold on to the love story that I think would have been there anyways. I don't think they needed to focus so hard on it, but they rushed through, a lot of the other things in order for Jesse and David to have their big moment. So now he's confused again. Now his friend he doesn't think he can fix anything, or he realizes that saving the basketball player wasn't the pebble, or at least it caused a different ripple that now he has to fix. So now, do you know where we are?
I do. So he's trying to do a specific jump, and I forget what he's trying to fix, but Jessie, the girl, interrupts him and is sucked into the vortex and jumps with him. And then we have the dramatic moment in the alleyway of how many times have you jumped? You've been lying to me. How do I know this hasn't happened already?
And this is happening the original night of the test.
Is that what it is?
I think so, because that's how the two Jessies meet, yes.
So the two Jessies become in the same area of each other, and we start to do that feedback loop, as they called it.
Oh, yes.
So the first time this feedback loop happened was when one of the characters was writing on the back of his neck. They saw each other, and they started to blink in and out of existence.
Have Adam and David had their confrontation yet? Where the rest of the group is coming. I'm confused now where this takes place in this movie.
It's a good time travel movie when you get confused thinking about it.
We finished this movie a half hour ago, and we can't piece it together. So let's get to the end, then we'll come back to the confusing part.
So she disappears. They have this feedback loop. She's blinking, 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 and then both of the Jessies disappear. David freaks out and basically says, we have to go all the way back to the beginning. This machine should never exist.
Yes.
So he breaks into the school again to get more hydrogen to power the device, and he's bleeding, and the cops are there, and everyone's chasing him. It's quite dramatic. And he jumps back to the day of his party when he was a kid.
Where this whole movie starts.
He fulfills
with the video
that whole
camera.
prophecy.
And it's kind of fun because he jumps at school because they're getting this cooling fluid, liquid, whatever it is from school. That's where they're stealing it. And so he rushes in there with the cops chasing him, and he jumps just right there in the AV room, basically.
And it's 2004.
It's 2004, and they got a bunch of Apple, I guess not Apple IIs because it's 2004, but they were as old as computers to obviously make them old enough to be the past. And we see a flip phone, and then so then he goes back to the party where this all begins. And what does he find in the basement?
His dad next to the machine. They talk. The dad recognizes that it's him, and he says, "You did it," or something.
His dad is very
not surprised.
No, he knew where this was going all along. Yeah, okay. Oh, yeah. Well, we'll just I don't want to interrupt you because you're on a good pace.
I mean,
and you go ahead ahead and finish.
Just to
finish
close this
off.
out, he has a brief conversation with his dad. His dad recognizes him. He says, like, you did it. And then the dad's like, I gotta go. So, like, the dad still leaves and I guess dies. He doesn't try to save his dad.
Yeah, his dad dies right after he leaves this party.
From a car accident.
Yeah. Giving his son a watch, of course, because you can't have a time travel movie without a good watch.
Right. So then, and still this whole time, David still has a camera. Everyone's still filming themselves. Everybody's still very narcissistic and always has a camera on.
Yes.
And he puts what looked like to me some papers and the actual glass box in a garbage can and sets it on fire.
At least some important pieces from the glass box. I'm still
Yeah.
not convinced he put the whole box in there,
Okay.
but the
Some
important
piece.
microchips
Yeah.
or whatever.
In a garbage can, sets it on fire, sits down, and then he himself starts to blink and disappear, and it all resets. And then they jump back to the moment in the attic with his sister where they first initially find the video camera, and then when they play it, it's them finding the
But
video.
now what do they find? They don't find one camera.
There's two cameras.
They find two identical cameras.
Do they find the two cameras, or they already have one of the cameras?
No, at the beginning of the movie, they found one camera.
Right, at the end of the movie, they find one camera, but they already have one camera, or they found
They
two
found
cameras?
two cameras.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm still wondering about that.
You know what? I can't now. Now that you say it out loud, I
We
can't.
could always go back and rewatch it, but it's more fun to discuss
It's better.
it.
You tell us where we're wrong. It's better that way.
Exactly.
And yeah, do they know? Do the people in real time? Does David in real time know any of this?
No, so his memory gets reset once he burned whatever in the bucket. It seems as though that whole timeline reset, and now he grew up not knowing any of that. Grew up normally like he did before.
Yeah.
Except this time there's two cameras, and one of the camera is showing a video of them finding the camera literally 10 seconds earlier.
Oh, I thought it was showing his dad. I thought one of them was the original camera, and then the other one didn't. The other one have the footage of him talking to his dad on it. No, Jesus.
Do we want to watch it really quickly?
I'll put it on here in a second.
Okay.
But this is when I fell in love with this movie again. Like, this is why I love time travel movies so much, because they all have something cool you can grab onto. Because there was a moment where I was like, I don't know if I like this movie very much, but when they found the two cameras, I fell in love with this movie all over. Like, I mean, I had forgotten that, because that's another thing. It's kind of vague who's filming what. Like, sometimes I feel like they're on someone's cell phone, and then sometimes, but I forget, and the GoPro they have, but I forget that the sister, Chris, the whole time, she's holding the camera that they find in the attic, and she's the one that's doing all the official filming of it. And it's kind of a nice camera, and that's how they get away with all this nice footage that we have that's movie quality. Yeah, compared to their fisheye GoPro and all that stuff. Let me look at some of my notes here while I dig up the end of this movie.
So yeah, my notes are, there's a second camera. So he burns everything, it resets, he disappears. Second camera means that it was all meant to happen.
Well, I don't know if it meant to happen, but it definitely did.
Yeah.
I think that's where, because that's the moment you get to where you realize you can't erase it,
Yeah.
which I always love that moment, that no matter how far you go back, no matter how much shit you burn, you can't even undo the past that you've already undone.
Yeah, and to kind of categorize it, this could be a consistent causal loop type of story, meaning that you caused it to happen to loop back on itself. So he was supposed to find it, to do all this over again, to do it all over again. It's just a loop, which
Okay.
I'm still learning the definition of all these kinds of time travel stories and paradoxes, and I believe this one falls under consistent causal loop, but I will get back to you on that.
Well,
Or if I'm wrong, you get back to me on that.
oh, perfect timing. Oh my gosh. So here we are. So he's just disappeared from the basement. The camera is running out of batteries.
Back
So
to the attic.
yeah, you're right. So now she does have a camera.
Oh, so they find two cameras.
So they each found an old camera in the attic.
And it's just what had happened 3 seconds earlier.
What are they?
So then the next scene is them doing time travel things, like
So
anticipating
this is assuming that everything that we just saw
was recorded.
was recorded on one of those cameras. But now because we're seeing a third camera angle, and that's what they're watching on camera number 2.
Yeah.
MTV Films, baby.
But also time travel, like, it's just, I love it so much because it hurts my brain to think about, but it also feels good and also pisses me off.
It's so good.
But I also love it.
And now for a quick break for contact info. Thank you very much for listening to another throwback episode of Time Pop. This was recorded way back in December of 2018. I think this was the second or third episode Ari and I ever recorded, so it's chopped and screwed a little bit. You might hear a few more edits than normal, maybe a little fuzziness as I try to figure out my my preamp settings, and I had not silenced or at least quieted my chair yet, so you can hear that creaking in the background like crazy. But nonetheless, this was a really good movie. We got a lot of great conversation out of it, even though we were still kind of working on the general structure of our show. And this is just a really good movie. I recommend you check it out. It's a lot of fun. It's, as we discussed in the episode, it's got its fallbacks. But if you like time travel movies, I think this is one that you have to see just for yet another angle on the whole aspect of time travel in popular fiction. And please tune in next week when we will be playing our third installment of our Terminator series as we cruise towards our release of Dark Fate. Obviously, our episode won't be out the day it's released. It'll probably take us a minute or two to get to the theater and see it, put together some notes and some real conversation. So if you go out and see Dark Fate this November, please give us some insight. Give us your insight. What do you think? Good, bad, ugly? How's Edward Furlong coming along? We'd love to hear from you. And how we can hear from you. If you've enjoyed this show, please like and subscribe to Time Pop and tell a neighbor or friend about it so you can enjoy a discussion of your own on the topic of time travel. If you would like to add to the conversation, please email us at timepop9216@gmail.com. That's timepop9216 at Gmail, and tell us your thoughts about this particular depiction of time travel and how you might use it. And definitely let us know about a time travel movie, book, game, etc. that we might discuss on a future episode. And if you would like to start your own discussion on this topic, please head over to Face, Insta, Twitter book. We are at tpop9216. That is at tpop9216. And please check out soundsawesome9216.com to hear what else sounds awesome. We got a couple other shows in the works that should be showing up there shortly. Thank you again for listening. We would love to hear from you. If not, just keep enjoying it. Tell someone else to enjoy it along with you. And we'll see you next week. And now, back to the big finish.
Okay, so in
I
conclusion,
have a bunch of random notes here, but yeah, they're just my brain thinking. Yes, in conclusion, time travel movies are amazing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this in theory was kind of a bad one.
So,
but
bad in the aspect, I agree. The way it was shot is kind of annoying. The handheld teenagery stuff.
Yeah,
you kind of have to let go of a lot of holes if you truly know your time travel theories and rules. You have to let go of some stuff.
Yeah, it's a fun ride.
It's a fun ride. There's some fun special effects.
Which I was in the mood for today. When I was trying to pick out what movie to watch today, I knew my brain couldn't do any math. So I knew I needed a kind of a fun ride. And this was a fun ride.
Yeah, we should get like a grading system, like a 1 out of 10.
Oh, definitely. Well, because I feel like I just want to give this like on a 1 to 10, I just want to give this a 5. Okay. Just because it's early, like later in our grading scale, I might rather give this a 3, but like this is I would watch this again. Like I wouldn't watch this over and over again, but I would definitely sit through this one more time, especially in a group, you know, get some people together, maybe talk through it a little bit more. But what do you think, Ari?
As far as just a time travel movie is concerned, I would give it closer to a 6 or a 7.
Ooh.
Overall as a movie, definitely a lot less because it's very high school and it's shot kind of, you know, you get a little seasick watching it and there are a lot of holes and the acting isn't so great. But as far as just time travel goes, you know, there's a lot of traveling. There's a lot of time travel. They talk about a lot of paradoxes and they also leave a lot out, which makes you really think.
I think why I knock it down a little bit is I like to know what the machine is more. And it's still just like once they introduce the machine machine a little bit, it just kind of goes away and they're just traveling through time. However, like,
Yeah.
and I think if we had had more of an idea of exactly what the machine was and how it worked and how they got back to real time, you know, were they just sucked back after the alarm went off, or
the science of it is definitely lost, which I like movies that really do try to explain the science well, and this doesn't really. Like I said,
but you're right.
6 or 7.
It's that. But as a traveling movie, and they bump into each other, traveling back and forth, and they fuck it all up, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But for now, I am Dez. Oh. I thought about it too in my head. But until then, I am Desmond McNeese.
And I'm Ariel Gala.
And this has been
Time Pop. Pop.